When I started my job that I currently work 7 years ago, we had a training class. And it's the longest training class I've ever had at any job, and it's the longest one in the company. It's 5 months long. There's about 18 people in this room, and you're going to spend the next 5 months with 18 people from diverse backgrounds and understanding and all that. So you can see it was fun. Our trainer was a former teacher, so she liked to do something that I hadn't had any other trainer do, and she would put us into groups, and we had group projects that we would do together in this training class. Now, I can't vouch for everyone. Me personally, I'm not always a fan of group projects when I was in high school or as an adult in the training class, because inevitably, there's two types of people in groups. The type of people that do everything and the type of people that do nothing. That's usually kind of how the group projects would go. In school, isn't that how it normally goes? There's the people that actually care and the people like, as long as we get a D, I'm cool. So it would be really fun. And since she was a former teacher, she would put the people who were advanced and excelling and doing really well in the group with the people who weren't doing quite as good. And then we'd come together for these group projects, and we would always kind of, you're kind of going to bash heads a little bit, and everyone's doing the same position, so no one's better than the other, and you're all training for the same thing, just like when you're in school. And there'd inevitably be at least one group who'd get up to do the presentation of what we were doing, and they'd get up there and you could tell they were not prepared as a group. They'd get up there and they'd be like, so yeah, this was our project, we were supposed to talk about this, and they start talking and you're like, that's not right. Like, none of what you're saying is right. And that's how working in a group goes. I don't know if you've ever experienced that as group projects in school or work, or sometimes even in churches where you're trying to do something together. Kind of like when we were building these walls, that was a group project. And if I was to step in and tell you, well, I think you need to frame it like this and do this, and I think that board's too close, you're going to look at me and be like, okay, because I don't know what I'm talking about. And I told everyone I didn't know what I was talking about. I was there to lift heavy objects and do some paint. That was pretty much my job, and encourage. You guys are doing great. I know where my place was in that group project. Today we'll be looking at the large portion of the group project in Nehemiah chapter 3. It took the whole city coming together in a group, doing the work at the same time to achieve what they were going to do. So before this, in chapters 1 and chapters 2, we see in chapter 1 where Nehemiah hears the bad news of the city, what kind of shape it's in. He prays, he fasts, he mourns, he sets apart his time, and he does this for months. In chapter 2, we see where he's been praying and fasting and mourning for 4 months. And the king said, hey, you look sad. What's wrong? Well, and it says he was fearful, takes a deep breath, tells the king, well, I'm sad because the town of my ancestors is in ruins, Jerusalem. Well, how can I help? The king says, how can I help? He says, well, I'd like to go back and rebuild a wall. How long will it take you? I need this many years. The king agrees. And Nehemiah could have stopped right there, been successful. But instead of just taking the opportunity when it came, what he'd been praying for, he was also bold about it and said, I need some supplies too. Can you send me with those supplies? I need timber. I need letters to the governors in the area. I need, some people. So the king agrees, gives him everything he needs. So then he's going through the province there in the area. He's coming through the region. And he talks to the governor and says, hey, here's the letters from the king. I'm going to Jerusalem. But he doesn't tell them what he's going there for. He comes in with officers and horsemen, timber, a whole entourage. And he just says, we're going through to Jerusalem. They don't know why. They know nothing about what he's doing. He keeps that to himself. And he arrives in Jerusalem. He rests for 3 days. And then, because it's an 800-mile journey, he's just done by donkey and horse and by foot. Not a very fun journey, I don't think. I wouldn't enjoy it at all either. So he takes 3 days, he rests, and at night he gets up and he goes out and looks around the town, telling no one where he's going, and checks out the city walls. So he's looking at it, what needs repair, what doesn't, and then he goes to the people then. He tells the people his plan to to rebuild the wall, how God had been with him and the God's favor had been with him before the king, and the king's part in it as well. And they say, let's rebuild the wall. But it wasn't until he gave them everything that he knew. It wasn't until they knew God was on their side. It wasn't until they knew the king was on their side that they said, let's rebuild the wall. And then it stops. Before it goes into chapter 3, it goes back to the three people, the governors of the areas all the way around him. And they're making fun of him, basically saying, you're going to rebuild the wall, or are you rebelling against the king? Because we know that's how they stopped the people of Jerusalem from building the wall in the book of Ezra in chapter 4. They wrote a letter to King Artaxerxes. He says, yeah, stop the building. So they're trying to trap him, and he says, our God will help us succeed. Our God is with us. He will lead us. And that's where we are in chapter 3. I'm going to go ahead and start with this and just say, there are a lot of names in chapter 3, and I really thought about maybe we should summarize this down a little bit, and felt like I shouldn't do that. So we're going to read the whole part of chapter 3, and there's a lot of names, so if you don't understand the names, or if I pronounce them differently than you do in your head, that's okay. So it's going to be a little bit of a fun part here. So if you haven't got your Bible reading in today, we are about to. This is about 30 verses. But this is the building of the wall. So chapter 2, they say, let's build, and 10 years later, they've got their plans ready and everything. It's just not really. It's not even 10 years. It's immediately they start working on it, which is awesome. So verses 1 and 2, then Elisha, the high priest, and other priests started to rebuild at the sheep gate. They dedicated it and set up its doors, building the wall as far as the Tower of the 100, which they dedicated, and the Tower of Hanel. People from the town of Jericho worked next to them, and beyond them, Zechar, son of Imri. The fish gate was built by the sons of Hassanah. They laid the beams, set up its doors, installed its bolts and bars. Miramoth, son of Uriah, and grandson of Hakaz, repaired the next section of wall. Beside him were Meshullam, son of Berechiah, and grandson of Meshezabel, and then Zadok, son of Manasseh. So you can see where I'm going with the name thing, right? Like it doesn't get better. Next were the people from Tekoa. Though their leaders refused to work with the construction supervisors, that sounds familiar too, doesn't it? People refusing to work with other people. I'm not going to work with that person in charge. I'm going to work with these other people. Even though they refused to work with the construction supervisors, the old city gate was repaired by Jehoiada, son of Peasiah, and Meshullam, son of Besodiah. They laid the beams, set up its doors, and installed its bolts and bars. Next to them were Melatiah from Gibeon, Jadon from Meronoth, people from Gibeon, and people from Mizpah, the headquarters of the governor of the province west of the Euphrates River. Next was Uzziel, son of Harhiah, a goldsmith by trade, who also worked on the wall. Beyond him were Hananiah, a manufacturer of perfumes. They left out a section of Jerusalem as they built the broad wall. Raphiah, son of Hur, the leader of the half-district of Jerusalem, was next to them on the wall. Next, Jediah, son of Haramath, repaired the wall across from his own house, and next to him was Hattush, son of Hashbaniah. Who else wants to say these names with me? We're only in verse 10, guys. So then coming Malchijah, son of Haram, and Hashub, son of Pahath Moab, who repaired another section of the wall and Tower of the Ovens. Shallum, son of Holahash, and his daughters repaired the next section. He was the leader of the other half of the district of Jerusalem. The valley gate was repaired by the people from Zanoah, led by Hanan. They set up its doors and installed its bolts and bars. They also repaired the 1,500 feet of wall to the dung gate. The dung gate was repaired by Malchijah, son of Rechab, the leader of the Beth Hakerem district. He rebuilt it, set up its doors, and installed its bolts and bars. The fountain gate was repaired by Shallum, son of Kohath, and the leader of the Mizpah district. He rebuilt it, roofed it, set up its doors, and installed its bolts and bars. Then he repaired the wall of the pool of Siloam near the king's garden, and he rebuilt the wall as far as the stairs that descend from the city of David. Next to him were Nehemiah, son of Asbuk, the leader of the district of Beth-Zur. He rebuilt the wall from a place across from the tomb of David's family, as far as the water reservoir in the house of the warriors. Next to him, repairs were made by a group of Levites working under the supervision of Raham, son of Benai. Then came Hashabiah, the leader of half the district of Kaliah, who supervised the building of the wall on half of his own district. Next down the line were his countrymen led by Banu, son of Henadad, the leader of the other half of the district of Kaliah. Next to them, Ezer, son of Jeshua, the leader of Mizpah, repaired another section of wall across from the ascent to the armory near the angle in the wall. We're going to show a picture after this to help make sense for people like me. Next to him was Baruch, son of Zabbai, who jealously repaired an additional section from the angle to the door of the house of Eliashib the high priest. Miramoth, son of Uriah, and grandson of Hakuz, rebuilt another section of the wall extending from the door of Eliashib's house to the end of the house. The next repairs were made by the priests from the surrounding region. After them, Benjamin and Hashub repaired the section across from their house, and Azariah, son of Messiah, and grandson of Anai, repaired the section across from his house. Next was Banu, son of Henadad, who rebuilt another section of the wall from Azariah's house to the angle in the corner. My remote's not working. There we go. Baal, son of Uzziah, carried on the work from a point opposite the angle and the tower that projects up from the king's upper house beside the court of the guard. Next to him were Pedaiah, son of Parash, with the temple servants living on the hill of Ophel, who repaired the wall as far as the point across from the water gate to the east and the projecting tower. Then came the people of Tekoa, who repaired another section across from the great projecting tower and over to the wall of Ophel. Above the horse gate, the priests repaired the wall. Each one repaired the section immediately across from his own house. Next, Zadok, son of Immer, also rebuilt the wall across from his own house. And beyond him was Shemaiah, son of Shekinah, the gatekeeper of the east gate. Next, Hananiah, son of Shelemiah, and Hanan, the sixth son of Zalaph, repaired another section, while Meshullam, son of Berechiah, rebuilt the wall across from where he lived. Malchijah, one of the goldsmiths, repaired the wall as far as the housing to the temple servants and merchants across from the inspection gate. Then he continued as far as the upper room at the corner. The other goldsmiths and merchants repaired the wall from that corner to the sheep gate. So there we go. So if you can see this picture well, it actually is labeled 3-1 because that's where they start. So up here, at the very top, underneath Jerusalem, says Sheep Gate. So that's where they start. And they start building from there to the Fish Gate, to the Old Gate, to the Valley Gate, going around like this, to the Dung Gate, all the way around the bottom, Fountain Gate, Water Gate, Horse Gate, East Gate, Inspection Gate, all the way around this wall. The reason I thought it was important to actually read all the verses instead of hitting the highlights is because all of those names that are really hard to pronounce, that aren't that fun to say, are people working together to build a wall. And I don't know if you caught this, but some of these people, a lot of these people, were not builders. Goldsmiths, one person was a perfume person, another person was a man and his daughters building the wall. Many people built the wall by their houses. It was the whole group coming together, and even some people from outside of the walls came in to help build. It wasn't just people who lived there. It wasn't just people that would feel its protection. It was other people who thought it was important for Jerusalem, the capital city of the country of Judah and Israel now, to be rebuilt. So that's the importance of it, but that's where it is. That's how they built. So the whole summarization of all those verses we just read, one picture, here you go. They started here, and they went all the way around and ended there. They went counterclockwise. That's how they built. And the impressive part is, this is 2.5 miles of wall. It doesn't tell us till chapter 6 how many days that took them to finish. But how many days do you think it would take to build 2.5 miles of fencing? Just normal fencing like we build, not even walls out of rock. 2.5 miles is a long, long ways. I mean, that's, 13,000 feet roughly? So think of how long that would take, how long you would visualize that. They built this in 52 days. 2.5 miles, working together. If that alone is not a miracle that they could finish that in 52 days, I don't know what else would be. I mean, this is a lot of building for non-construction minded people. So I think that's part of where we're going today, and seeing from their examples, working together. The first part of it is building God's kingdom. It's a group project. For them, it took all of these people applying, whether it was their gift or not, applying practice. It says later that, in the next chapter, that the governors of the other areas mocked them for the materials they were using. It said some of them were burned. Some of the rocks they were using were burned. Are they going to build the wall out of rubble? They were reusing parts of the wall that had fallen to rebuild the wall there, because that was the most easily accessible source to use. So they were building God's kingdom together. I think it's easy for me, kind of like when I was in the group projects at work, and if you've been in those, to say, we only want, when we're building here, we only want construction-minded people to do this. And trust me, if I was building part of this wall, you would be able to tell which part I built versus which part everyone else built. And when we do group projects, that's how that is a lot of times. You can tell who did which part because of the way the product comes out. Right? Let's be honest, this 2.5 mile wall they built in 52 days did not look as good as the wall the first time. The temple, when it was rebuilt, when Ezra was there, they says that the people wept when they saw the temple. Some believe it was tears of joy, other ones believe it was just sadness of seeing how unspectacular the second temple was compared to the first. I don't believe that the wall would be much different. I think they rebuilt it, I think it was fortified, I believe it was strong, but I don't think it was pretty. Because how great looking of a wall can you build in 52 days? Another part of it is when you're building something, have you ever built something and you're building this section and this person's going to build this section and you're going towards the same spot? What happens when it's like this or like this? You ever done that? Like, is it just me that me and my friends we're digging in the mud, we're playing with Hot Wheels when I'm a little kid, and we're digging this little trench, and then you realize their line doesn't match up with your line, so then you got this little awkward spot where you kind of have to dig it to go around? I imagine the wall had parts like that where it may have looked a little awkward, it may have looked a little wonky, parts where maybe they had to go around rubble that was left that was too big to move. But it took everyone participating, and that's the next part, is everyone's contributions are needed. It's easy for us to step back and say, when we're working together, I just need your input on this little piece here, and we'll do the rest. But everyone's contributions were needed to rebuild the wall, and when we're working together in God's kingdom, we're working together to build God's kingdom, to share Jesus with other people, everyone's contributions are needed. It's not just the responsibility of the worship team or the pastor and any of those people, but everyone's contributions are needed. Part of it is, one part, many hands make light work. I mean, if you can imagine, only the construction guys built the wall, it probably would have looked better. It might have been stronger, it might have done this, but I bet it would have taken years to get done. I mean, there's a 2.5 mile stretch between 60 on 65 and Ozark that they've been working on for what feels like the entire time I've lived in Branson. They're widening it to 3 lanes. That's probably about 2.5 mile stretch. Maybe 3 now with the addition they're working on, but they're just building a road that's flat with machines, and it's taking them years to do. We're talking about 2.5 miles of a wall that is, they're not building a 6-foot privacy fence. This is a wall tall enough to stand on and be able to see down. It's a wall tall enough that it hides houses and buildings. It's roughly 15 to 20 foot tall at this time. There's part of the wall still there that you can see, and it's rather large. It's higher than 20 foot even. So it takes everyone's contributions. The time, the matter, if your goal is to see your family come to know Jesus or your friends to come to know Jesus, you can't expect someone else to be the one to do it. I mean, it would be great if I could say, and it might be someone else. But if we're planting seeds and we're planting the seeds out there, and that's we're talking about Jesus. We're, like you shared, you're waiting for the opportunity to be able to say, this is what's going on, or, can I pray for you in this? When things happen, instead of saying, oh, hey, I'll add you to our prayer chain, or I'll send an email to my pastor to pray for you, can I pray for you too? Everyone's contributions are needed. That's when you're working in a group, because everyone, if we're working together, if you've ever had one of those groups where everyone's working for the same reason, for the same purpose, it goes much smoother too. So everyone's efforts are needed, because that's why it's part of the group project. And the third one is really important. Don't be afraid to ask for help. They had help from people that did not live inside the walls. It's not their city. It's not their houses. It's not even their direct family. It's distant family, but it's like going to your 10th cousin's house to help rebuild a fence at their house. Sure, you're related, but are you really at that point? I mean, this is hundreds of years. You've never met them. You don't know them. If you were standing in line behind them at Walmart, you would not know them. They're that cousin. You don't even know you're related. But you can't be afraid to ask for help. One thing that I think is most dangerous for Christians, for churches, for people in general is we're almost in a society where everything's so public that either we scare away from asking for help for anything, or we put everything out there hoping that someone will hear it or help it without asking for it. Because most people don't want to get involved in someone's situation. And whether it's good or whether it's bad, we don't usually volunteer, hey, do you need a hand? Sometimes we have to ask. Sometimes that means swallowing our pride a little bit, saying, hey, I need help doing this because I'm not good at that. Or I need help doing this because I need to learn to be better at this. And I will say, I think this is probably harder for some people than others to ask for help. If you don't like asking for help, you know who you are. I'm one of you. I don't like asking for help. I'll figure this out on my own. And Google has only made that more stubborn and worse. I'll figure this out on my own. When I pull out my phone, I'm going to Google this. 15 articles later, 3 pages later, you're like, yeah, I need to ask for help because I don't have a clue. Or you think you know what you're doing. Like, I think I can handle this, and you usually mess it up. But maybe that's just me. I know there's times when I'm working on something and it's like, oh, I made this worse. I need to call my father-in-law, or I need to call my dad. Like, depending on what I'm working on, of which one's the better one to ask. But don't be afraid to ask for help. If you're in a group and they ask you to do something, whether it's at church, whether it's at work, whether it's at home, whether it's in your private life and your family, because even your immediate family is a group and you're trying to do something, don't be afraid to ask for help. The fourth thing is be passionate about the work we do. Whether if it's for God like this, if we're talking about building the kingdom, it's being passionate about it. Or if it's at home or whatever you're trying to do. But if you're working together with other people and you're trying to achieve something, you're going to have to be passionate about it. Because, one, should you be building something that you're not passionate about, something that you don't care about, something that you don't love? Is that something you want to be doing if you're working with other people? But if you're working on the kingdom of God, you're in the church, say your job is to be a greeter. And some people think, well, that's a demeaning job. All you have to do is stand at the door and shake hands and open the door. When we were at Scenic Church, the guy who was the greeter there, his name was Lloyd, was an older guy, and we called him Mr. Fantastic, because you'd ask him, hey, how are you this morning? Fantastic. That was his answer. Every single time you'd ask him. Didn't matter if it was Sunday morning before church, Sunday night, we're there for Tuesday night prayer meeting, whatever it was, even before the board meeting, fantastic. That's how he was. He was passionate about something just simple as greeting people, and you'd be amazed at the amount of people who know who I'm talking about that are from the Springfield area, have been in that church when I say Mr. Fantastic, because that's how he responded to it. It may not be the most beautiful job or luxurious or the most highly helped, but he did it with passion and pride. So whatever we do, if it's standing at the door, if it's picking up the trash, if it's greeting people at the parking lot, or just putting stuff up, we can do it passionately. part of doing things passionately, I believe, is doing them to the best of our ability. For them, the people building the wall, I imagine a goldsmith is very talented. I mean, they literally make jewelry and things out of gold. It's what they do. Very talented. How talented do you think they are building a wall, though? Right? I mean, like, they probably have some general consensus, but it's a totally different trade. But they went out and they did it anyway. So, was it the best as the person, as a construction person? Maybe not, but maybe it was their best. So when we're working in a group, if we're working with people, if we're working together with our family, whoever it is, it's to our best ability. Because we may have different bests, and that's okay. Because wherever our best lies might be different than others. Something they say, and I hear a lot when we're talking about groups, and we've heard it in the church, is that one thing that people are really good about, or really bad about, depending on where you fall, is that they say 90% of the work in churches is done by 10% of the people. That's one thing I've heard forever. I don't believe that's true here, but I believe it's true in churches I've been at in the past, where there's a few hundred people, and you know there's 20, 30, 40 people, maybe 50, that do almost everything. One church that I was in, where I actually answered a call to preach at and rededicated my life and met Kristen, that same church was about 350 people, and there was one person who she was the church photographer, she was the Sunday school superintendent, she was the janitor, she did all the cleaning through the week, she did the design on the wall, she, all of these jobs. And part of all people are like, well, she should let someone else do those things. Well, that's great, I agree. But who's going to do it? Some of these are really necessary jobs and all of them were necessary and need to be done, because you don't want to come into church and here, we don't want to come in, we don't want to have trash bags full and bugs flying around and trash on the floor and drinks and food and whatever just thrown anywhere. Someone has to clean it up and pick it up. Someone has to be the Sunday school superintendent. And that was a large church that had a lot of kids classes and a lot of adult programs on Sundays and Wednesdays both. It takes work. But she was passionate about it, she did it, and I still think she wears a lot of hats at that church today. And it's not always because other people want. Some things are just she enjoys doing. She's gotten used to it. But when we're working together, it's be passionate about what we're doing, and it's also working well together. Doing our best. That's all we can do. If it's teaching, preaching, music, cleaning, just doing our best. And then the fifth thing, and this is the most important out of all five of them, is put our faith in God and believe He will give you success. That isn't a promise. It isn't just saying that I'm going to put my faith in God and believe that He'll give me success, and success is defined by $1 million, or success is defined by a big house. But when we're working together for God, we're trying to build God's kingdom, we're trying to make a difference in Branson, as we're working here in this town to help people come to know Jesus, we have to put our faith in God first. Before we can even do the other 4 steps, this is where we have to start. It's with our faith in God and belief that He will give us success. A friend who's a pastor of mine, she's also a nurse practitioner, and she was one of Kristen's nursing instructors. She always says that, there's no try. Either you do or you won't. There's no try. I believe it's the same when we talk about our faith in God. If we either believe we will be successful, or we believe we will be unsuccessful, and most of the time we're right. Because if we're believing, okay, this is going to fail. Have you ever had that where you've gone to something, you're like, oh, this is going to be really bad, and then it is really bad? You ever had that? Maybe you're about to play and you haven't practiced, and you're like, oh, I'm not going to know any of the chords, or I'm not going to do any of this right, or whatever it is. You're going to work and you're thinking today is going to be a terrible day. You woke up angry and you're upset. Today is going to be a bad day. Most of the time, if you're like me, whatever you believe it's going to be is right. If you believe it's going to be bad, if you believe it's going to be terrible, if you believe your coworkers are all terrible, if you believe your job sucks, it's all going to be true. But if we can put our faith in God and believe that He'll give us success, whether it's at work, whether it's at church, whether it's in that conversation with that friend that we've been wanting to talk to, we've been dying to talk to, but we're afraid to, we'll believe God is with me in this conversation when we're successful. Does that mean that we never get shut down? Does that mean that we never get tore down or turned away, or we never have off days or bad days outside of that? No. But sometimes the mentality that we go into something is the mentality that comes out of it too. And that's just an effect. And when we're working together in a group, if you ever have that one person who's really negative, and this is how they see everything, and everything's wrong and nothing's right, that usually spreads. They say like negativity is actually easier to spread than positivity. Like in restaurants, you're a restaurant manager. Negative reviews go a lot further than positive reviews. Do you ever have a negative experience somewhere? How many people do you tell? Oh, someone will ask you, how was this restaurant? Oh, I went there once and it was like this. The line was packed, the bathrooms were dirty, the food was wrong, I'll never go back there again. How many people do you tell when something's good? Like, we expect good, normally. I know people that do reviews, and one of them's a guy I work with, and he does reviews everywhere he goes. Because he's like, I don't want to be non-biased, I don't want to just do reviews at places where I'm upset. So he does reviews everywhere. We'll sit there and be like, yeah, the food's good. He goes through and he travels a ton. So he's in different states and different places all the time. And he always does it. But most people I know only go to look for a place to leave a review when they've left and it was bad. So when we're working together in a group and we're believing, we want to have more of a positive look to believe that God is going to give us success. The conversations that we have, most people will never talk to their friends about Jesus if they believe that that person will have a negative effect on their life, right? Well, what if they're no longer friends with me because I tell them this? Or what if they don't want to talk to me anymore? Or what if they fire me? Or whatever it is. When we believe and we step back and say, God is with me, like Nehemiah did, when the people came to him and said, why are you doing this? He said, my God is with us and He will see that we're successful. So when we can step back and we put our faith in God and say, even if this doesn't go the way I think it should go, it doesn't go the way that I want it to go, it doesn't mean that I'm not successful. It's following in the path that God has for us. Because working in a group is never easy, whether if it's for God, whether if it's for work, because everyone has different opinions. One thing that I've had to get better about myself is knowing when to voice my opinion. This isn't in my notes, so this is a freebie for you. Knowing when to voice my opinion. Because something I've learned as a pastor is that I know pastors who are very left, and I know pastors who are very right. I know pastors who are pro-football, and I know pastors who are anti-football. I know pastors who believe in pretty much any variation you can think of. I know people, and for me, growing up in the South, Texas, Tennessee, Missouri, and my dad living in South Carolina, I have a totally different view than a pastor who was raised in California and spent his entire time on the West Coast. And I've gotten to talk to people, and I'll say something, because I'm really good about putting my foot in my mouth, and realize they do not believe like me. They do not see things the same way I do. And when we're working in a group, there's two levels to this. Sometimes God tells us we need to say something. And those are important to say. God says, hey, you need to say this. This is why I believe. But other times, there are times when we need to hold back what our opinion is, because it's just our opinion. It's not from God. It's not scriptural. It's not this belief. What they believe may not be inherently wrong. It's just different than your opinion. So it's hard to know between the two of those. And sometimes, I was talking about this with someone this week, someone who has a very different view on something that I very strongly disagree with. And it's like, how do I talk to them about this without it being there for an argument? Whether it's about politics, whether it's about abortion, whether it's about gun rights, immigration, whatever, people have very strong opinions on these. And I do think it's important for Christians to have a proper perspective and understanding of what they're talking about. I do believe that. I believe it's our right as Americans to express our beliefs, and you can go through all of those things. I believe in all that, but I also believe that what we put out there in public space, social media especially, is exactly that. It's very public. I know people who've not been hired for jobs because of what they've put on social media. My boss will tell you before they hire someone, if they don't work for the company already, they look them up on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, some of the other things, and see what they post. When we're working with other people, we have to understand that we have different backgrounds, different beliefs, different understandings, and that doesn't mean that it's wrong to say what you're going to say. Doesn't mean that it's right what you're going to say. But we have to know the times when someone's going to be receptive of it. Because I think we fall on two sides of this. When we're working with someone else, we're trying to share Jesus with them or whatever's going on in their life, and they're sharing about something we strongly disagree with. And most people that have those opinions that are different, especially than Southern opinions, let's be honest, we're in Missouri, we're in a right state. It's red. Most everything here is red. If I have Kristen's aunt, uncle, and her grandma even, have all been Democrats all their entire life. I kind of vote for whatever I think I need to vote for. I don't really believe in either one. I believe they're both inherently wrong. But when we're talking politics, because this is the main thing that we'll see it, there's left and there's right. And most people, they have their opinions made up in their minds, and they're not going to change it in an argument. So is it the best thing to have that argument when they've been preparing and having this argument person after person after person? Or is it best to just show love, show grace, show peace, just work together in a group? Don't be afraid to ask for help. Be passionate about what you're doing. Because no matter where we are, no matter what we're doing, I promise you there will always be someone who will disagree with you on anything. Some people will disagree with you just to disagree with you. And that's okay. Because we can either allow it to hinder us and ruin what we're trying to do when we're working together. And we're trying to share Jesus with someone well, like the woman at the well. Jesus goes to her. And he's talking to her. She says, in response, he goes, and they're talking for a little bit. Well, give me water. Well, a Jewish man shouldn't be talking to me. He says, well, if you knew who was talking to you and asking you for water, you would ask me for water. You would ask me for the living water. And then as they continue the conversation, he says, well, go get your husband. She said, well, I'm not married. Well, that's right. You've had several husbands, and the man you're living with now is not your husband. Well, I see that you're a prophet. You people say that we should worship here, but we worship here. She changes the topic to something that's debated, that's part of a normal conversation for them to debate. The Pharisees, the priests, the religious rulers would have this debate of where should you worship on a regular basis. Instead of allowing a deeper spiritual conversation, she tries to derail it. And Jesus doesn't even address it. He continues his conversation. His way of addressing is saying that one day will come when you'll worship anywhere. Anyone who worships me will worship. It doesn't matter if it's on this mountain or that mountain. That's his response. It's not that important. When we're working together, there's things that will be vastly important, that will need to be addressed, and there's things that we will allow God to address and God to work through in God's time.